Hey everybody, it's Rabbit. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reviewing some gameplay and giving you some pro tips on the game of War Thunder. So long story short, I had a game in the Type 90 and I felt a lot of the aspects of that game would be helpful tips and tricks for somebody who was not as experienced or maybe didn't know more about the technical side of War Thunder. And the first set of tips are mainly going to revolve around the engagement in the background. This is specifically, we have a T-Series tank, we have the back end of it poking out from behind a building, so we shoot it, set it on fire, knock out its engine, and obviously you only have to shoot it 3 times in order to do this because each vehicle only has 2 fire extinguishers. Technically, it can receive help from an ally if I were to set it on fire 3 times. However, I have pretty good line of sight in this particular position to pick off any allies. And this also does bring up some small tips on this because I feel like a lot of people are already aware that you only have 2 fire extinguishers. Number 1, always keep in mind that you cannot repair the vehicle while you are putting out a fire. So if you continually set a vehicle on fire when their engine is knocked out, they will never get to repair that engine. Another tip, and this is kind of vehicle specific, but if you are knocking out the engine repeatedly, you want to favor high shots over low shots. Knocking out the engine can set somebody on fire, but doesn't always do it, whereas hitting fuel tanks almost always sets the enemy on fire. And fuel tanks are usually higher on the vehicle rather than lower. So for this reason, when I'm trying to do this kind of shot, I usually like to favor shots as high as possible. This does also bring up the fact that while hitting something like a transmission can immobilize a target, it won't actually set it on fire. And also this brings up another interesting point. Knocking out the engine will remove power to the vehicle, but it won't stop it from moving, so if it has momentum, it'll still keep moving. However, if you knock out the transmission or the tracks, it will basically kill it dead in the water. So if you need to immobilize somebody right now, for example, if they're trying to get on a capture point, trying to aim for things like tracks or transmission is better than aiming for the engine. Obviously, that is kind of a specific tip, but it is something to keep in the back of your head. I will also say that if you are on the receiving end of this type of engagement and somebody is repeatedly knocking out your engine and setting you on fire, one thing that you can do, and this is a useful tip, is simply to pop smoke. Now, popping smoke, I have given advice in the past that you shouldn't just do this reflexively, and indeed, if you have teammates that are nearby that can potentially shoot the target, this might stop them from doing so. However, in this particular instance, you're not really blocking any teammates' line of sight, and if you pop smoke, I won't be able to see the instant you have put out the fire. Obviously, while the fire is still raging, I can see it, and as soon as it stops, I just shoot you and set you on fire again. Now, if you pop smoke, I actually have to guess when you put out the fire, which means I could potentially spend multiple shots to your 1 fire extinguisher, which extends the amount of time it takes me to take you out. And in this kind of position, your survival odds go up the longer you make the fight take, the more shells you make your enemy waste. On top of that, usually if somebody is doing this to you, they're having to weave shots in between buildings or past a building, and if you pop smoke and they can't see exactly where the building is, they might have to do a little bit more guesswork and potentially even whiff a shot depending on how much they're having to move. So in general, while I do get kind of annoyed at opponents for popping smoke an excessive amount of the time, this is one of those scenarios where there's very little downside to it, and you could potentially make the engagement more annoying or increase your chances that a teammate will come by to assist you. Also, one thing to remember, not only can you not repair while you're on fire, but also hitting the same system multiple times doesn't do anything. Hitting a track that's already broken, hitting a barrel that's already broken, doesn't add to the repair timer at all. It will repair in exactly the same amount of time. So if you've already broken the barrel, you should probably shoot something else like tracks to try and get that repair timer up as high as possible. The engine is really the only system where you want to shoot it multiple times because the engine can set you on fire potentially each time you hit it. This next tip is actually a little setup specific. If you have full surround sound, you can generally tell pretty easily exactly where somebody is around you. However, if you have a much more limited setup, such as only 2 speakers with a left and right input, what you might have to do is what I have to do a lot of the times, which is where you look at a wall where you hear an engine noise, and then you look a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right to kind of zero in on exactly where that audio is coming from. You basically bracket the audio so that you can get a better idea of exactly where the enemy vehicle is on the other side of that wall, which admittedly does kind of look like you have wall hacks if somebody were to just watch it and not have any context. Although in retrospect, War Thunder, much like a lot of first-person shooters, having good enough audio can be equivalent to soft wall hacks. Now, this position specifically on Aral C, I don't really care for all that much from an audio perspective, because if you hear audio coming from your left, They can either be going through the buildings and wrapping around, or they can be going outside of the buildings, and these two positions are essentially 180 degrees from each other. So the audio information, if you're not interpreting correctly, can be confusing because somebody could either be coming out directly in front of you or directly behind you if you can't zero it in correctly. With that being said, you'll notice as soon as my teammate is on point and successfully capturing it, I immediately turn 180 degrees away to watch the approach to the B point. This is one of those principles I always try to hammer home because I feel like a lot of people miss it, is you should always endeavor to cover things that are not currently being covered. Certainly sometimes your teammates are kind of oblivious, but most of the time if your teammate sees something, they will attempt to shoot at it, and that'll at least give you a small bit of warning before you need to react. Whereas if both of us were to watch the approach to A, then anybody going to B would just slip completely past us. Now you'll notice I didn't shoot the Leopard 2 right away in that last engagement, and that's because I didn't need to. They didn't notice me. And this is one of those principles where you need to understand when you have time, and when you do have the time, you should make sure that your shot both hits and kills or cripples the enemy in the first shot. If the enemy doesn't see you or they're on reload, do not rush your shot. Take your time, make sure you take them out, because those are easy shots and you should hit them. Now I want to briefly pause because I did hear the gunshot go off behind me, and if you look in the kill feed, the only kill from an enemy in the kill feed is an Object 292. The Object 292 has an autoloader with a 10-second reload, and the Type 90 is a fairly mobile tank, so we have plenty of time to rush around this corner and take them out before they're going to have a new shell in the chamber. If the vehicle was something with a much faster reload like an Abrams, I would probably simply have to back off of the corner because I couldn't get around it and take them out in time. This is one of those meta things that you're simply going to have to learn and get a feel for as you progress through the game, is getting a feel for about how long you have for a given reload. And honestly, even looking at the tanks and the tech tree and trying to see what their base reload is so you can generally know what to expect is not a bad idea, especially if it's an enemy you're commonly fighting like Shermans, Panthers, T-34s, etc. Autoloaders in particular make this pretty easy because when you have something like an autoloader, it only ever reloads at the same rate. So if you're in something like an Abrams with an experted crew that has a reload of 5.3 seconds and your opponent is in a T-80 with a 6.5 second reload, and both of you basically whiff your shells at the same time or only knock out non-critical components like tracks or engines, you have the reload on them, so you can afford to simply sit there and aim on target to make sure you hit. You don't have to back off. Now in this fight I turned around because I specifically noticed that the teammate behind me had been taken out by an enemy. However, I whiffed my shot. You can see I actually led the target correctly, but I led into a building, so it obviously didn't do anything. So what I did was I chose to take a position behind this tank in front of me that was burnt out. And this is where I get to a principle of there's nothing wrong with nothing. Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply be alive and distract the enemy, and by me distracting the enemy, they showed their flank to my teammate who was able to take them out. Now in this instance you can see I'm not shooting right away, and I'm going to pause it to show something in this armor viewer. This is something specific to Russian tanks, but there are a few other tanks, especially as you go higher in battle rating, that you will notice this on, and that is the composite ERA in the front of the vehicle actually does wrap around to the side to a fair bit, especially because there's also an ERA package that is also on the side of the turret. So if you're shooting at these top tier Russian tanks, you want to shoot in the back roughly third of the vehicle to guarantee your shell doesn't non-pen off something like ERA and composites. Now here we're about to see a fatal mistake because our opponent lost their commander and their gun breach with my shot, and I can't see their hull at all. If I could have seen their hull, I would have been able to knock them out with that shot. This is where my opponent decides to back up, but not only do they decide to back up, but they make a fatal decision to turn their turret facing me. If they keep their turret facing forward, the breach is going to absorb a large portion of the shrapnel, so it won't necessarily hit something like the gunner, which is the only way I can realistically take them out right now. Realistically, what you actually want to do is turn the turret towards me but point it slightly off to the side so that it's only seeing the part of the tank with the deceased crew member in it, so they can't shoot the live crew member without all of the shrapnel just hitting the breach. But because they turn their turret directly towards me, I actually have a perfect line of sight to hit the roof right over their gunner, knock out their gunner, and knock out their entire vehicle. Always remember, parts of your tank that don't have any crew or ammo are essentially free real estate and can be used as ablative armor as needed. Now, briefly hitting on the spot I'm in, the reason why I'm in the spot I'm in for basically the entirety of the game at this point is because it has perfect access to both the A and the B point, and as long as my team holds those, we win. I don't need to push anywhere else, I don't need to shoot the enemy in spawn, and I don't need to take the C point. As long as I can stop the enemy from crossing to either of these two zones, we will win the game. Now, in this fight, yet again, audio cues tells me where the enemy is, and I know from experience that there are some gaps in these buildings that you can use to get some pretty cheeky shots in. The first shot hits engine and fuel tank and sets the opponent on fire, which reinforces what I said earlier. Fuel tanks are normally higher up on the vehicle, and in theory, we could simply sit here and set them on fire 3 times. With that being said, the second shot actually hit 2 crew members and also knocked out the turret ring, so at this point they can't move and they can't rotate the turret, so we just drive around to the front, knock out their driver, and we're good to go. And fights like that are the reason why the number one tip I always like to give to players is make sure you're looking in that little report box to see what you damaged on the enemy, because it can inform your decision of where to shoot next or even what actions to take. And that wraps up our video for today. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something. If you did, please leave a comment down below. I always love to hear from you guys. If you liked the video, like and subscribe always helps out the channel. As always, danke bitte tschüss.